main room of an exhibition called Sustainibilty in Ballydehob, and I'm very fortunate to be here just prior to it opening to the public. And the first work that you see as you come in is ceramic, and these three pieces that are in front of me I think are particularly interesting. I really like this piece here, and I find it fascinating that the person who made this work has an affinity with the sea, and maybe it's very obvious that this particular piece is very vessel-like, as in a boat vessel, I suppose. And I'm also interested in the darkness that's here, yet through the way that the piece has been kind of raised up on these very, very small feet, it's kind of generated also a kind of very light quality to the work. The other thing that you can't hear, but if you were to visit you would hear, is the sounds that are associated with these pieces. So there is a soundscape, and the soundscape reminds me somewhat of the movement of sand, which, although I don't know whether it actually is that, connects in very nicely with these pieces, because these pieces are very sand-like, very rock-like. So there's a kind of a real sense of erosion going on in and around the pieces. These pieces, I wondered if they were all made by the same person, because they look so different. And I understand that they're actually two different people's work. The interesting thing about that is that they really seem to work very well together. The U, which is beautifully crafted and beautifully figured as well, somehow seems to bring out the qualities of the sheepskin and the green woodwork that makes these stools. The yew strikes me as a particularly symbolic wood, and I'm wondering whether or not the maker was thinking about that when they produced these pieces. It's a very ancient wood, and I suppose for me, I associate it with things that have always been, and hopefully always will be too. It also, I suppose, reminds me of some of the things that humanity has done in its time, and there is a history of yew being used for the construction of bows in warfare. And the other interesting about yew is that it's very often found in churchyards. So it has a very kind of ambiguous quality, I guess. But in this case, the figure that you see here on the pieces is really beautiful. And the legs are also very interestingly turned. What immediately drew me to these pieces that are in the window is the material around the finished work. I guess you could say that they are remnants or materials associated with the making of the pieces. There are some small pieces of very fine sanding paper, wet and dry paper, that I guess would have been used for finishing, and lots of clippings of silver and copper, and I guess it takes you back to the raw material. And there's something I find very interesting about the raw material. A lot of the time when you see a finished object, you don't really associate that finished object with the raw material and what maybe it was at the beginning of the process before it was transformed into something beautiful and delicate and original. These pieces, particularly this hanging piece, have a really kind of quite strange quality about them, and I think that's one of the things that drew me to them when I was looking through the pieces here. It's reminded me somewhat of a witch's broom, and maybe the contents, and there are some contents in this vessel attached to the sticks, and I won't tell you what they are, but you'll find out if you come and have a look. But all these things make you wonder, I guess, about whether these are associated with the process or whether they're associated with something more magical. I think perhaps that's the right word to use with finished work. I'm in the back room downstairs and standing next to an installation, I guess, of what looks, from a distance, what looks like driftwood and bone. It's actually ceramic. I think it's ceramic anyway. And the pieces are suspended. And I am very intrigued by this piece. I immediately thought, when I started associating the ceramic with bone, I started thinking about something that has exploded and has been kind of captured in that moment of explosion as it kind of moves out, and what maybe it was before that happened, or maybe even the other way around, that something's coming together and being reassembled. It's a really intriguing piece. It looks like the ceramic has been raku-fired, or if it isn't raku-fired, it's stained. I can see lots of crazy lines on the surface of the glaze, and maybe even put into sawdust, perhaps. I'm not sure. It's a really interesting piece, and made all the more intriguing by an object on the other side here, which is a kind of mystery object. It's not ceramic. It's probably closer to wood, and it's very, very old, and something to wonder about, I think, about how, as you walk up the stairs, you're kind of becoming part of a process of completion, really, and also as you walk down the stairs, that whole process is reversed, so you're going from construction from the beginning through to a construction, and then from construction all the way down to a complete deconstruction of the willow, from where it began, I guess, as a very small branch, all the way up to multiple pieces woven together in an incredibly detailed and really, really skilled way. It's I think one of the wonderful things about basketry is how you can see how something's been put together. You can actually see how each individual strand is woven in and out of other pieces of wood, and how the shape has been formed. It's almost like you're looking into the kind of the mind of the maker, and how they've actually worked out how shape is going to come about, and then they've actually made it. So this, to me, I suppose, is a really good example of traditional craft, and how looking at traditional craft throughout the whole of the process, you can end up with actually objects which, you know, in some ways, the very first piece here, which is almost like a sickle, is kind of just as fascinating as the finished basket right at the top of the stairs. If you go up the stairs, I think we're halfway between the first and second floor, you will find another world, a world of sea smells. And well, it's certainly sea smelling at the moment, and I'm sure if you come and visit it will be smelling slightly differently, maybe look quite different to this as well, but for now it's the home of these creatures, and I just feel that they ought, first of all, I feel they ought to have names. They're such characters. They're really interesting colours. They are ceramic, and it looks like a combination of ceramic and copper wire, and they've all got these really big eyes, and as I noticed as I was walking up the stairs earlier on to go past them, they kind of look at you wherever you are. They're always looking at you, and they're clearly, well, I don't know, perhaps they're not impressed, or they're certainly very aware that we're here. So I think that the other thing that I have been informed about these guys is that they are, in the real world, they do exist. They do exist, but they're incredibly tiny. They're too small to see, but they are out there in the oceans doing their thing, and I think that's a really interesting idea, the idea that
somebody has decided to bring something that, as far as most people are concerned, doesn't exist into our kind of place of reference. So yeah, come and visit these guys. They are definitely worth having a sniff around, and they're fantastic colours. I keep just looking at them again. I'm seeing a lot of, I think, probably mother of pearl, but lustres. Anyway, some beautiful lustres on the surface of these creatures. And somebody needs to give them a name. Maybe the maker will give them some names. I think they deserve to be named. They look like they really have got something important to tell us. Recycled materials are a good example of, I suppose, repurposing something that was something else. There is quite a lot of, in the case of glass, there is quite a lot of heat work involved, as is also the case with working in metal and ceramics, and that area is potentially problematic. We obviously generate electricity in somewhat dubious ways in this country at the moment, and it's a difficult one to square the circle when it comes to working with sustainable materials and then applying large amounts of heat to the material to finish the product. So that being the case, I guess I'm looking at the green wood and the basketry that I've shown you earlier on. And I'm thinking how, in many ways, these are the most sustainable examples of the craft that you can see here. The wood will grow, even if it may take a while to grow, and certainly the willow in the basketry will grow very quickly. In fact, so quickly that, in my personal experience in my garden, it probably too quickly. It's cut every year, and I still can't keep up with the cutting of it. But that's a good thing. What can I say about coming to the exhibition? You should visit. You should visit while it's running. It's running from the end of this month through to sometime in the end of August.